The Washington Commanders secondary has been a dumpster fire this season, but does that mean that Kamren Curl isn't coming back next season? That question and more on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're getting your podcasts. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders Insider. Join the Locked On Commanders Insider program. You'll get news, inside information, exclusive content delivered directly to your phone via text message. Plus, you get one-on-one conversations with me again via text message. Always excited to welcome new insiders to join the program today. Get in on the fun. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to sign up for that. I'm David Harrison, your host of the program on Twitter at dharrison82, credential member of the media covering your Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And everydayers, you already know, I salute you. I appreciate your continued support for the show. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. On today's episode of Locked On Commanders, we're going to look at every level. There's only two, but we're going to look at both levels of the secondary, current future, near-term future, and long-term future. I'm going to tell you why Emmanuel Forbes possibly needs to be back in the starting lineup for good. But first, we're going to talk about safety Kamren Curl. And this is our mailbag episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, you look at the banner to the right of your screen as you're watching it, and you can tell this is a secondary heavy mailbag this week, guys. Jay Martell dropped a question on YouTube, I believe. He said, mailbag question, super excited. I'm super excited too. What would you pay a guy like Cam Curl this offseason? Now, this is a conversation we have had before, and I will freely admit that I have rubbed some people the wrong way with my evaluation of Cam Curl's contract coming up. But I will tell you, like I say then, I'll say it again in the future. This evaluation of Cam Curl's contract is not based on what I necessarily think that he's worth or how much I think that he's worth. It's just me kind of looking at the way that the NFL is treating safeties. And they're not treating safeties as poorly necessarily as they're treating running backs, but it's not very far off. Safeties are certainly one of the more underpaid positions in the National Football League. And it seems like every year we have this conversation in the offseason of certain safeties specifically, but safeties in general, just not getting the contracts that a lot of people expect them to get. So when I do these evaluations, I do tend to lowball the number on a safety contract simply because I don't have a lot of faith that the NFL system is going to get back to paying guys the way that necessarily they should be paid. So I just want to make that clear because I think the number is going to come in a little bit lower than a lot of people think he should get, could get, and certainly wants to get, right? So Cam Curl's in the final year of his rookie deal, 4-year contract that began in 2020. And currently this season, he's on pace to set career highs in tackles, solo tackles, assists, near career highs in sacks, tackles for loss, and quarterback hits. He's currently on pace, Cam Curl is, to have 137 tackles this season, 1.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, and 3 quarterback hits. Now, the thing that's really kind of holding back his evaluation from a production standpoint is that he hasn't had a single interception since his rookie season, which even for a safety that's used more in the box than many other safeties, that's not good. You still need to be getting at least some interception production. Now, looking at last year's numbers for safeties, 5 safeties last year hit the number of sacks, tackles for loss, quarterback hit projections that Cam Curl is currently set to hit. None of those safeties that hit those numbers had 137 tackles. So that's an advantage to Cam Curl. But the 5 safeties that did hit similar numbers were Derwin James of the Los Angeles Chargers, Donovan Wilson of the Dallas Cowboys, Talanoa Hufanga of the San Francisco 49ers, Damar Hamlin of the Buffalo Bills, and Antoine Winfield Jr. of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the problem here is that all of those safeties had at least 1 interception, except for Damar Hamlin. So when you look at which player from 2022's total numbers most closely resembles the stat line that Kamren Curl is on pace to set this season, that's Damar Hamlin, who finished last season with 6 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hits, 1.5 sacks, and 91 tackles. That's more tackles for loss, the exact same quarterback hits and sacks, and 46 fewer tackles, which is a big gap, right? That's a very large number. And both of them had no interceptions last season. Now, overall, Hamlin's production last year was better than Cam Curl's when you look at 22 to 2022 side by side. But Hamlin is also on a rookie deal, so he's really not a great comparison. There's not a whole lot of money comparisons you can do in that situation. So really, we have to use Donovan Wilson of the Dallas Cowboys as a comp because he signed a new deal this offseason for 3 years, $21 million. Obviously, that's a $7 million per year average. And in 2022, Wilson collected 101 total tackles, 5 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 9 quarterback hits, and he had an interception. So more sacks, more tackles for loss, more quarterback hits, and of course the interception. Then Curl is on pace to have this season, but fewer tackles by about 30 to 35. Now, inflation is always the thing, right? So there's contracts are always getting inflated every single year. But I think if you had to stop the season right now, that's about what Cam Curl is looking at getting, probably from a starting point of a conversation. Again, you got your starting point, you got your end point, and usually you're kind of somewhere in the middle when everything is said and done. 3 years, $21 million. Wilson got a little over $20 million guaranteed, so it's actually a pretty good deal for him. But it's likely that Curl's going to want even more. And when you look at him functionally, Curl's 2022 grades were higher in just about every single category except for pass rush over Wilson. So again, the play on the field, the stats are one part of it, but the play on the field certainly is another part of it. So if you're only stat scouting, you're looking at Donovan Wilson saying, okay, that's a fairly good start point, right? But get beyond the stats. When you look at grades, that's where Pro Football Focus kind of says, okay, let's go snap by snap, film by film, and compare these guys. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't watched a whole lot of Donovan Wilson football, so I can't sit here and say this is where Cam Curl is better based on my observations. But what I can tell you from Pro Football Focus is that Cam Curl currently is the 24th highest graded safety in the NFL. His run defense grade is 46th overall. Tackle grade is 17th. Pass rush grade is 93rd. Coverage grade is 16th. And that averages out to about 39th overall, which is much lower than I think we really think that he is. And if you weigh those things, your pass rush grade from a safety, not all that important. Your run defense from a safety is not important in the way the PFF grades it, right? PFF grades it like stuffs and all those stuff. And you're not asking your safety typically to go in there, get those types of plays. Tackling is really important for a safety. Coverage is really important for a safety. And that's where Cam Curl comes in 17th, 16th in the National Football League. So that is where you get beyond the stats a little bit. There's still kind of stats, but at least those numbers are based on player evaluation and tape, not just what the stat box says, right? So this season, Cam Curl's numbers are down across the board in evaluation and PFF. So the stats are up a little bit. The grades are down a little bit, which certainly isn't going to help. But I know that there's been rumors, there are reports that Curl wants like $7 million a year, and his spot track value estimation is $15 million per year. So I think that's the range, or what he wants more than $7 million per year. I'm sorry, that's what Donovan Wilson got. He's definitely going to want more than $7 million per year. Spot track values him at about $15 million per year. So I think that's the window you're looking at. I think the Commanders are probably going to come in $7 to $8, $9 million a year. Curl's camp is probably going to come in closer to that 15 million number. And I think eventually you probably, if all things stay the same, I think you probably settle in around that $10, $11 million a year mark. Maybe it's 10 million or maybe it's 12 million per year on average, but the guarantees work out to about 10 million per year on a 3-year deal. 3 years, 30 million guaranteed, potentially up to what would it be? 55 million in total incentives and all those stuff. Again, the lack of interceptions and the down year in his evaluations. And yes, like it or not, PFF grades are used and mentioned in negotiations by both sides. Franchises use them, players use them. It is a thing. So that's kind of where I would project now. I think the floor, the floor that any franchise is going to try to get him for, because they're trying to save money, is going to be $7 million a year, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think his locker room presence, his on-field execution is going to bring him much more towards the $10, $11 million range. And then he's probably going to want like the $14, $15 million range. And we'll see where, which side buckles first, right? So the status of the coaching staff obviously has a lot to do with it. Scheme is going to have a lot to do with it. And whether or not Josh Harris decides to change the staff, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to re-sign any players until you know what you're going to do with your coaching staff. So we'll have to watch out for that as the offseason gets nearer. I don't think that any new contracts are going to get done the remainder of this season. So while Kamren Curl is left wondering right now where he might be playing football next year and into his future, rookie Emmanuel Forbes is trying to figure out how much football he's going to play. I'm going to tell you that he should play, barring any further ejections, more than he has in recent weeks, except for last week in New England. And I'll tell you why coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy for you to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experiences so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Again, that's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Score this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook right now. New customers, if you're new to FanDuel, you get a $150 bonus in bonus bets. You get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 money line bet that wins. That's $150 if your team wins. Right now, the Washington Commanders are currently 9.5-point favorites to beat the New York Giants next week in FedEx Field. With the over-under on that for total points scored is at the 36.5 points. If you think the Commanders are going to pull this off, but you don't necessarily like getting the 9.5 points spotted, go ahead, put a $5 money line bet on the Washington Commanders. And if you're a new customer and that bet pays out, you'll get the winnings, but you'll also get $150 in bonus bets. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. Plus, there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and, of course, money lines. My favorite thing is to build my own parlays. They're a little bit more risky, but they're incredibly exciting, and I have a lot of fun doing it. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and get winning this NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen, your first view today and every day. Locked On has launched its first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts on Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. That's right. First of its kind, 24/7 every day. Thanks for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. Let's get into the next question in the mailbag. This one's coming from Insider Rob, and he says he hasn't played bad recently, but does Emmanuel Forbes deserve a starting spot back in the Washington Commanders lineup? And here's what I'm going to tell you. Kinda. I know that's such a on the fence answer, isn't it? I'm going to tell you why here in just a minute. Despite the ejection, I still felt like it was worth diving into what he did against the Seattle Seahawks, because we already know he had a really great week playing the New England Patriots, right? 91 overall grade from Pro Football Focus, easily the highest of his career, played 75% of the defensive snaps. It's kind of one of those like I'm back kind of games. Did that carry on into week 11? So even though we only see 5 snaps, I felt like it was still some value in breaking this down. So play number 1, 1st and 10 at the Seattle 25. All these plays on the first Seahawks possession of the game, because that's the drive that the ejection happened on. Seattle comes out 11 personnel. Washington is lined up in a zone look with Forbes lined up on the strong side of the offense. The tight end is in line, and they've got 3 receivers and a bunch on the weak side, opposite of Emmanuel Forbes. Quarterback Geno Smith is in shotgun, and the running back is lined up weak side to Geno Smith's left side. So if you can envision that, Washington's running cover 3 here. So Forbes has the far third of the field, even though he's actually lined up inside the numbers because of the offensive alignment. Because the tight end is in line, Emmanuel Forbes shrinks inside, reduces down inside, gets closer to the box. Now, his responsibility when this ball is snapped is to cover the open, strong side third of the field. If Seattle comes out in a pass play, and his responsibility is to contain and force the run inside if it's a run play. At the snap, running back Kenneth Walker III is in motion. He executes a play action with Geno Smith. For my taste, Emmanuel Forbes bites up on the play action a little too much, but because he's got super long legs and he's got really good burst, once he sees that Walker doesn't have the ball, he's able to bounce back out into his zone pretty quickly. Now, on this play, Smith gets the ball out very fast. It goes to the opposite side of the field, so there's really no issue with his backside pursuit. Once the ball comes out, that's pretty much all you can evaluate from there. The angle was good. The effort was good overall. Not a bad rep for Emmanuel Forbes. Again, I wouldn't want him to dive that much on a play action, but it wasn't like it was super detrimental or anything, even if they went that way. Play number 2, 3rd and 6, Seattle 39. Seattle comes out 11 personnel again, but this time they're in a 10 alignment. So one running back, one tight end, but the tight end is split out like a wide receiver. They got 2 receivers and the tight end bunched on the right side of the formation, which is the strong side of the formation, and one receiver, DK Metcalf, lined up to the weak side by himself outside the numbers. The running back is weak side left of the quarterback in shotgun. Washington is once again showing zone, pre-snap, and Forbes is in press alignment on DK Metcalf. Washington comes out and covers 6. So on this side of the play, or on his side of the play, Forbes' side of the play, Washington is doing a cover 4 look, while the opposite side, the 2 receivers and the tight ends where they are is more of a cover 2 from the Washington defense. At the snap, Forbes doesn't physically challenge DK Metcalf's release and instead gives him a clean line up the field, but stays on his hip, shadows his release, does all those things. And they both work, Metcalf and Forbes both work up towards Kamren Curl, who is covering the deep quarter of the field in that cover 4 look. Metcalf tries to give Forbes a little bit of a stutter step halfway down the field to shake him, but out of his break before stays with him step for step and has Smith. It had Smith tried to target Metcalf. Forbes and Curl are in great position to make a play. So obviously the ball doesn't go there. Definitely a solid rep for Emmanuel Forbes and Kamren Curl for what it's worth. Play number 3, 1st and 10 at the Washington 41-yard line. Seattle comes out 11 personnel with a 10 look again. 2 receivers in the tight end are on the right side, strong side. Metcalf is again by himself on the weak side, short side of the field. And again, Forbes is lined up on the offense's weak side, lined up across from DK Metcalf. He wasn't following DK. They just happened to put him there multiple times. Again, Washington shows zone pre-snap. They're running cover 1, which typically features man coverage underneath, single high deep safety in zone coverage. The Seahawks use motion, and linebacker David Mayo goes with the running back, which gives away the underneath man coverage. At the snap, Forbes is 7 yards off the line of scrimmage and off coverage, another sign of man coverage, especially against a guy like DK Metcalf. Metcalf comes off the line at the snap with an inside slant release, breaks it down, breaks outside. Forbes crashes down as Geno Smith's eyes lock onto DK Metcalf. Smith doesn't throw the ball to Metcalf. Instead, he is flush from the pocket, eventually throws it out to his running back in the opposite flat. Now, it's good coverage and execution from Forbes in my eyes, because honestly, if Smith throws to Metcalf, he probably completes the ball. But if it's too inside, Emmanuel's going to pick it off. If it's too far outside, then DK is probably not going to get to it. But if it's on the dot, Metcalf's probably going to get it. It'll be a 5-yard gain or so. So you're looking at 2nd and 5. It's a successful play for the offense, but not a great play for the offense. Instead, because of Emmanuel crashing down on the route, Geno holds the ball. The Seahawks get the ball out the other way, and they're actually called for a holding penalty that would not have happened had Emmanuel Forbes let DK Metcalf have too much room and Geno Smith try to deliver the ball that way. Play number 4, 1st and 20 at the 49. Seattle's in 11 again. 11 alignment. Tight end is in line on the strong side left side. Tyler Lockett's outside the numbers. Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba are split wide to the right, with Metcalf outside the numbers, far split. Washington's in a man look. Forbes is on the defensive right side across from Lockett on the strong side of the formation. He's in normal coverage alignment, and this hints at zone coverage behind him because of Lockett's speed. You usually give those guys a little bit more space. Turns out the Commanders are running cover 2, so Forbes is responsible for the intermediate 5th of the underneath zone on his side, while the 2 safeties play deep, and the middle linebacker gets at depth depending on what's happening in front of him. The Seahawks use running back motion to expose the zone before the snap, and at the snap, Forbes actually shades in front of Tyler Lockett's route to try to cast him off course a little bit and doesn't draw a flag while doing it. Smith's eyes are firmly downfield, not on the back. He allows himself to drip back a little bit, and despite the running back in the flat, it was a good area of responsibility coverage by Emmanuel Forbes. Smith goes over the middle to the tight end. The linebackers converge to make the stop. Final play 5, 2nd and 14, Washington 45. Unfortunately, this is the ejection play, but Seattle comes out in 10 personnel. Forbes is on the short side of the formation. Kenneth Walker is split wide. That immediately hints zone because you got a corner on a running back. Nobody's covering DK Metcalf directly in the slot. Forbes is also off, so he's got 2 safeties lined up deep, which hints at quarters coverage or cover 3, depending on what the safeties do at the snap. At the snap, Forbes and Fuller continue to drop back. Curl comes down into a closer zone coverage, revealing cover 3. Here's where the match zone comes in, because the match zone, they don't just come down to their zone and pass guys off. No, they link onto a guy. They attach to him like a barnacle on a boat, and they carry him. Emmanuel Forbes is carrying Kenneth Walker when Tyler Lockett clears the linebackers, comes into Emmanuel Forbes' area. Emmanuel breaks off a Walker, makes a play on the receiver, and ends up getting ejected for the hit. Honestly, looking back at it on tape, on coach's tape, it's a bad play, guys. It's a very bad play, and Emmanuel Forbes absolutely deserved to get ejected. What can we tell from those 5 snaps? Solid man technique, solid zone technique, not panicking against top shelf opponents, not overplaying anything. And Jack Del Rio is using him in multiple looks. Emmanuel Forbes, 5 snaps. He's on the field in cover 1, cover 2, cover 3, and cover 6, all of which have different responsibilities. So it's showing continued growth, continued understanding of the scheme and his responsibilities. Basically, he's on his way to another strong showing, stacked on top of his career high 91 grade in week 10. Does he deserve to be starting moving forward? That answer is yes from a talent standpoint. It might be a no based on what the Washington Commanders are facing in the future. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings roll in. With the basketball season here, you can now pick a combo projection across football and basketball from their Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or different leagues. I pick 3 players for projections every Thursday night, and I like to throw in a basketball player here or there. The Washington Wizards are in action again Wednesday night. I might go ahead and throw some action that way. Whatever I want to do, I know Prize Picks has got me. So if you want to get in on it, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that promo code LockedOnNFL at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Wrapping up our mailbag episode here on Locked On Commanders, and everything's kind of bleeding into each other. We talked about Kamren Curl in the opening segment, broke down a lot about Emmanuel Forbes in the second segment. And I know the question wanted to know, does he deserve to start moving forward? And the answer is yes and no. And I'm going to tell you why, because it bleeds right into this question from Michael. Washington's defense tops the league in passing yards and touchdowns allowed. What part of the secondary do you feel should be addressed now? And the same question for the offseason. And that's where things get a little bit tricky. Michael, an insider, greatly appreciate that question. The trading of Chase Young and Montez Sweat signaled in a lot of ways a shift in the way that Washington is approaching building the roster. Coach Rivera acknowledged that as well. But what is the shift? That's kind of what the question is, right? To me, it looks like a shift in making everyone basically prove that they're worth long-term investments before committing to them. That goes for players and it goes for coaches. So keeping the focus on the secondary, this group currently has Benjamin St-Juste, Emmanuel Forbes, Christian Holmes, Danny Johnson, Quan Martin, Percy Butler, Derek Forrest under contract for 2024. So that's 4 corners, 2 safeties, and a Quan Martin, who's a corner or a safety, depending on how you want to play him, right? So that's not a terrible group of guys. It's a lot of young potential, undeveloped or not fully developed talent. Tariq Castro Fields, Terrell Burgess, Kendall Fuller, Jeremy Reeves, Troy Apke, in one way or another are free agents. Some of them are restricted, some of them are exclusive rights, all that stuff, but they're in some way, shape, or form free agents of some kind. The big decisions that have to be made are obviously on Kendall Fuller, Jeremy Reeves, and Kamren Curl. Already talked about Curl. Revo, I mean, he's an all-pro special teams guy, solid safety. I mean, you certainly love to see him come back. But Kendall Fuller is really kind of the question here, right? Because when you talk about the scope of the season, Kendall Fuller is going to be around 29 years old when the Super Bowl comes. The big reason that I don't necessarily see this ownership group keeping Kendall Fuller around is because of that factor, because you're only getting 1 year out of him under the age of 30. You're looking at long-term here. You're looking at the road ahead. You got a first-round draft pick in Forbes. Benjamin St-Juste is entering the last year of his rookie deal next year. And you got Quan Martin. You got some other young guys, and who knows what you're going to do in the NFL draft, right? So to me, that looks like the most likely guy to possibly be departing this group. So you could make the argument of, well, if Kendall Fuller is not going to be part of the team's future, bench him and put Emmanuel Forbes, Benjamin St-Juste out there with maybe Danny Johnson. Figure out what you have in those 3 so that you can make a smarter decision to move forward. And certainly there's some credence to that. The problem here is that Kendall Fuller has been pretty solid this year. Not amazing, not perfect, but he's been solid. And you don't want to give that up because the NFC is not running away from the Washington Commanders in the playoff picture, right? I know that nobody wants to talk about playoffs right now. I wrote an article for CommanderCountry.com about playoffs, and I got some comments about playoffs. You talking about playoffs? And I get it. But the truth of the matter is, Like, we're not even to Thanksgiving yet. By the time we get to Los Angeles against the Los Angeles Rams, this team could be right back in the playoff hunt, could be in a playoff spot, even if the chips all fall. Correct. I'm not saying they're going to. I'm just saying they're not that far out of the playoff picture right now, right? So you want to stay as competitive as you possibly can, but you also want to get some looks at your young guys. And that's why I say yes and no, because Emmanuel Forbes certainly needs to get his reps. Benjamin St-Juste certainly needs to get his reps. And Benjamin St-Juste, you kind of want to leave him out there as much as possible because, again, he's entering the final year of his rookie contract. He's due to make $1.36 million next year with a dead cap figure of $267,000 if he's traded or released. And I'm not saying you need to release him or trade him or you should or shouldn't. Not really a big savings, so there's no push to get rid of him, but nothing preventing them from trading or releasing him if someone, say, wants to give you a 5th rounder or a 4th rounder and you feel like it's worth it, right? At safety, you're pretty much stuck based on injuries with Curl and Butler leading the group, Martin getting some safety reps now, again, because of those injuries, depending on what Derek Forrest, when he comes back, if he comes back. And I wouldn't say the team should go away from that anyway until Derek Forrest gets back. So not likely to create a whole bunch of movement or improvement this season, to be quite honest with you, because there's not a lot of options. There's not a lot of real free agents out there that are available. Trade deadline is passed, so that's not going to happen. As for the offseason, I think right now the most likely course, again, is letting Fuller walk in hopes that he gets a deal elsewhere that lands you a 2025 compensatory pick, which is another reason you want to leave him on the field, because if he does well enough to draw attention from other teams in free agency, he gets a good enough contract, gets enough playing time. You know what I mean? Who knows? Maybe ends up a Pro Bowler. It sucks to see him thrive somewhere else, but you get that comp pick the next year. I'd like to see Kamren Curl back, but again, I think that's very coach staff dependent. So I think I'm looking at a mid-round corner in the NFL draft to come in and either provide depth behind St-Juste or compete with St-Juste in training camp. And I'm looking at another safety in the 6th or 7th rounds to add back-end depth while hopefully guys like Derek Forrest get healthy and hopefully Cam Curl is back. Now, the better that Derek Forrest looks when he comes back from injury, if he comes back from injury, makes it harder actually to bring Cam Curl back because they're very similar type safeties. So depending on who the coaching staff is, if the coaching staff kind of looks at Derek Forrest, says, we got this guy, we don't need Cam Curl to be another guy, we'll move forward. So again, very coaching staff dependent. Looking at free agents next year, Antoine Winfield Jr. is the crown jewel of the safety class from free agency standpoint. If the Tampa Bay Buccaneers somehow let this dude out the door, I mean, Washington's got to go full bore at him. You know what I mean? This is a guy who deserves, to use an NBA term, a max contract. Like that dude is a dude who send shockwaves around the NFL if he was actually available. I would be shocked if the Buccaneers let him out. But if he does, you got to go for him, right? Couple cornerbacks, Jalen Johnson from Chicago Bears. He asked for a trade this season. Didn't happen, but it's unlikely that he's coming back. He's turning 25 next season, so still very young. Chiefs cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, just young enough to still have a full potential picture in the long term. Again, both those guys are different scheme fits, so again, it depends on the coaching staffs. They're certainly going to make a difference, right? But if you get Winfield, guys, you got to go get Winfield. I'll tell you, if you want a defense with some teeth, Antoine Winfield Jr. will bring some bites. You guys brought the heat on this mailbag episode. Hopefully I answered all those questions to your satisfaction. Coming up tomorrow, we got crossover Thursday. Patricia Traina and I, Locked On Giants, Locked On Commanders, will be talking about this week's game. In the meantime, you got questions or comments, throw them in the YouTube comment section. Find me on Twitter or text me directly as a Lock Insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with local experts on Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe for the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Thank you so much for making me a part of your day, part of your routine. Until we speak again, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.